You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt Migaki, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you've ever wanted to sneak backstage and share a beer with one of your favorite musicians, well, Vox and Hops is the podcast for you. This week on the podcast, I dropped a killer episode with Johannes Ekström of Avatar. There is this episode and over 440 other ones to help you enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. So what are you waiting for? It's time to become a Vox and Hops head. Cheers!
Today's episode of the Tone Mob Podcast is brought to you by the Sound Parcel. That's right, we've talked about them before. That's the place you go to rent guitar gear. I mean, who doesn't want to try out new weird things that you can't hardly find anywhere else? They've got all kinds of crazy things over there, and the system that Dave set up is super nice and super easy to use. I've got to try it myself. You may have heard on a prior episode. And I'm told that there is a discount code. If you just enter Tone Mob, you're going to save yourself a few bucks on your first rental. So head on over to thesoundparcel.co and give them a try. It's a great service, and they got a lot of cool things for you to feast your ears on. This episode is also brought to you by the fine feathered folks over at Sinusoid. Yes, Sinusoid. What's a sinusoid? Well, it's not for your sinuses, despite what you might hear on some other podcasts. No, it's a place for you to get awesome guitar cables, aux cables, just any cable that you need for your musical enjoyment. You can get it over at sinusoid.com. Those guys are awesome. They're a big supporter of the podcast, and if you like the podcast, get yourself a cable. Spread the love. That's what we're all about here, is spreading the love. Also, another thing to note about the Sinusoid cables, 100-year warranty. So, if you get to be 100, your cable fails, it's like, oh well, it doesn't matter, because it's covered. You just call up Andy, who'll be like 100 and something then, because I don't know how old he is, and they'll fix you up. So, check out sinusoid.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the ToneMob.com podcast. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today, I have Matt Knight from the Guitar Nerds podcast. How's it going, man?
Hello. Good morning for you, I believe. Good afternoon for me.
It's good morning. I'm not a morning person, yet I've been recording so much in the morning. I'm trying to become one.
Yeah. No, I'm sort of more of the opposite. If it gets to the evening time, I'm asleep. I'm asleep so early.
My
cat wakes me up at 5 a.m, so I'm just used to getting up at 5 a.m. now.
Oh yeah, no, I'm a night owl, and so yeah, I just like sleeping. I don't know.
It is a good thing. But yeah, no, I'm calling technically from the future, and I can report that today has been a good day. So, you've got lots to look forward to.
Oh man, I feel like today's a good day too. I'm trying to talk the wife into going to see Logan. I don't know if I'm going to be successful.
I haven't seen it yet. I don't even know if it's still on at the cinema in the UK. Films run for like 2 weeks now in the cinema, and then they kind of just like disappear.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah.
Over here, it seems like it all depends. Like if the movie's doing really well and still bringing in people, then they'll go ahead and keep it going. But like if it's kind of a flop, they'll just pull it. But then we have second in my neck of the woods here in Portland, we have and they have them in other parts of the country too, but they have second run theaters. So like a movie that's been out for a long time, and then it goes out of the normal theater, it will then come up in the second run theaters, and it's like $3 to go watch it, and you can usually like get a slice of pizza and have a beer or something while you're watching the movie.
Because here, I mean, I don't know how much it is to go to the cinema in the US, but here, like for two people to go, it costs like the equivalent of nearly $30, I suppose, $35 to go to the cinema. But to watch a movie, but you can get like a 2-for-1 code that you can like buy like travel insurance for like £7 for a year, and then you get like free 2-for-1 cinema tickets once a week. So, but we just do that and go like once a month or whatever.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, I'm just not going to pay like $35 to go to the cinema.
I have to,
especially when drinks cost a load of money, and so does the food. So it kind of becomes an expensive outing.
It does. That's depending on where you go around here. That's pretty similar. I mean, it's usually like $10 to $12 a piece, and then, you know, the more expensive, nicer theaters can be more, you know, a lot more than that.
Yeah.
But it's like at that point you're like, well, we might as well, like, go to the nice theater and sit in a big comfy chair. If we're gonna spend, you know, $25, we might as well spend $35 and be comfortable.
Yeah. True.
What is this, a movie theater podcast? I don't know. What are we doing right now?
I just like the American way of life. You know, it's interesting to me, to us English, all the way on the other side of the of the ocean.
I don't know. I visited London several years ago for just a little bit, and I don't know. It was definitely different, but it didn't seem drastically different. I don't know. Maybe I was having a distorted tourist view.
Yeah, I suppose the kind of crazy thing for me as well. You know, we obviously met for the first time properly at NAMM, and because America was, to me, was just like everything felt like totally different. Just all the people, and you know, it was a great vibey place to be. But you know, we went to Las Vegas afterwards, and everything was just like everything's like almost like its own individual country. Like every city is just like because America's so, you know, massive, obviously. But I suppose I've just always lived in the UK, so I'm very used to kind of how it is. So anywhere outside of that just feels like massively different.
Oh, interesting. I don't know. I loved it though. Me and my wife constantly are like, we must go back.
Wow.
Like,
you've always got a place to stay.
All right. That's awesome.
I'm just outside central London, so there you go.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, we stayed in like the Westminster area.
Okay. Yeah, that's not too far away from where I am.
In this little tiny, there's this hotel chain. I don't know how many people have heard of it. It's called Tune Hotels, Tune.
No. And
their whole deal is like the bed's comfy, and that's it. Like it's like you are sleeping in a closet, basically.
Yeah.
With a bathroom. It's the smallest. It's barely big enough for. It was barely big enough for my wife and I and our suitcases.
Yeah, but I suppose at the end of the day, the only thing you're doing there is like sleeping there. So
that's their whole.
It doesn't really.
Yeah, that's their whole marketing angle. They're like, you're not going to be in your hotel anyway. Why pay a bunch of money? You just want to be comfortable and have a place to take a shower.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same mindset on that one. Unless someone else is paying for the hotel, then I definitely want a really nice room.
Well, of course. We did it backwards. We stayed in Ireland for a little bit, and we stayed in a castle for a little while just because we're like, we're coming over here, we're going to do it up. But like we couldn't afford to do it up in London.
Yeah, there's not many castles in London, and I think you kind of have to be the queen to be able to stay in them. So
That's true. Well, let's get into the meat and potatoes here. Why don't we start with, for anybody who doesn't know, we kind of explain your musical backstory and what you do in the kind of gear world and why we're talking today.
Yeah, well, okay, so I do a podcast with 3 other people called Guitar Nerds, which we've done now for 4 years, 2 years under one name and 2 years under another. So we all used to work in a major guitar store in the UK called the Guitar Amp and Keyboard Centre, or GAC as it was kind of nicknamed, which I think is the name of is some nickname from like Nickelodeon. If you're probably from America, GAC probably means like the slime in Nickelodeon, if I remember rightly from when I was a kid.
GAC was a thing. Yeah, you're right. GAC, it probably had some sort of Nickelodeon reference, but GAC was a toy. And it was basically goo in a can.
Yeah. Yes. So it was kind of like, I think, you know, when we had kind of people from America, they're like, that's a weird nickname, but that's what it was always called. So, but before that, I mean, I started playing guitar when I was 15. Finished college, didn't really know what I wanted to do. Thought I'll give playing guitar a go. Went to music college for 2 years. Loved 1 year, hated the second, and realised, do you know what? I'm never ever going to make it as a famous musician. But I love guitars, and in the same town that I was studying in, there was Guitar Amp and Keyboard Centre. I applied for a job, and because I had a Saturday job working in a guitar shop back at home before I moved away, they were like, well, you can come in. Can you do full-time hours? I was like, yeah, totally. And then within like 4 years, I was the assistant manager. Then I became the manager not long after that. And we all met when I was managing, and Mark, who's one of the other guitar nerds, was managing, another department. And then Jay came in, and he was the assistant manager after a while, and we were sort of our whole crew. And obviously I gave Joe a job in the bass department, and we did that for 2 years until we kind of all left. And then we were like, oh, this is actually really fun, so we should keep doing it. And that's when Guitar Nerds kind of formed from an idea that Mark had in his head, being like, we should keep doing the podcast, but now that we're not tied to a store, we can sort of talk about whatever we want. Because I remember in the very first episode of the GAC podcast, I mentioned Strymon, and everyone was like, you can't mention Strymon, we don't sell it. And I'm like, but
Oh no.
so it's kind of like, it gave us more of the kind of freedom to talk about what we want and to be a bit more fair. I think the difficult thing with anything, in terms of like stuff for reviews, I think like gaming magazines always like it, is that people do obviously generally pay for the reviews, or people are more favourable towards one thing or another, and people are like, oh, you always give things like 5 stars or 4 stars, or however they rate it. And it's just like, we sort of wanted to do that because we only really want to talk about the gear that we like. But if there's a piece of gear that we're unsure about, we kind of want to have the freedom to be like, I think they should change this, or we've got this problem with it. And it opens up a lot more debate, which when you're tied to a store, you can't really do that, because you're sort of, in essence, you're sort of selling a product. So now that we do Guitar Nerds outside of all that, it's opened up a lot more doors as well, which has been super nice.
That makes sense.
That's I suppose for me, like, guitar gear has been like my main focus for the last 15 years. Like, I've had guitar pedals pretty much since the day I started playing guitar. In fact, my first guitar pedal came pretty much before I started playing guitar, because I knew I was going to get one, and my local guitar shop, which was an amazing shop before it closed when I was younger, I was just like, oh, what are these? And they're like changes the sound of your guitar. I was like, oh, yeah, I just have to get one. And I bought it because it looked cool. And actually, it sounded pretty good as well.
What was it?
It was an old Dan Electro 18-volt Cool Cat. So it was the early one. So they used to do those big ones in big metal cases. They still had the like weird metal, terrible switches, but they had an old chorus that was like 18-volt. And I think, thinking back about it, I think it must have just been a Boss CE2 clone, because it just had depth and rate. But it sounded great. It sounded absolutely awesome. Nice. And I had quite a few Dan Electro pedals after that as well, because they were one of the only brands that you could go out and buy normally. I mean, it was those, MXR and Boss, I think, were probably the only brands that you'd see in 90% of guitar stores.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the boot, it's not like today. Today's insane. But, yeah, people forget there was a time there was only, like, EHX, Boss, Dan Electro, MXR, and, like, DOD. And that's basically it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, when I first started working at GAC in Brighton, we had the first Pigtronics phaser, the EP1, which was like the big kidney bean. And it was the phaser with the envelope control, and it was £199. So, a couple of $100. And I was just like, that's so expensive. Who's going to buy that? And I think we never sold it at that price. I think it sat there for ages and ages and ages. It's just like, it was so expensive. And by the time I left working in retail, and we were selling, Van Wielden overdrive pedals that were £600, $700, $650.
Wow.
Every week, almost every day, I was just like, the game has totally changed. And in a way, that's good because people can have a lot more creative freedom, and but in another way, people can totally overcharge. And I think depending on how these companies market their product, people can be like, yeah, I really want one. And you're like, oh, it's $400, but you kind of wonder, has $400 gone into it? That's the thing. It's just like price on some of them is through the roof, I suppose.
Yeah, so some things are insane to me. I don't want to call people out publicly, but some things are crazy to me. But then some things they seem crazy. But if you talk to the builder and find out well, I spent 6 years developing this.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? You never know the true story, and I think a lot of times with companies like MXR or Boss or Electro Harmonics, we build pedals on such a massive scale compared to other people, and you have to realize that economies of scale, in the sense that you build tons more. If you build 5 times as much, the price is going to come down, which is always in some aspects has had a negative effect, because people are like, well, that product's cheap, so it's not going to be very good.
Oh yeah,
and it's like, but it's only cheap because we can make so many of them. Like, if we're making so many of them, surely there must be some people out there. And I actually used a good example on the Guitar Nerds podcast the other week, was the Digitech Bad Monkey. I think you can pick most of those up they're discontinued now, but you can pick them up on eBay for $20, $30. And they're a great sounding overdrive. And they're only $50 new. I think it's just because they can make so many.
Yeah, that's the key right there. Is if you can move, if you can build 10,000 of something versus 100, just the price of your parts alone, is drastically different, and it completely changes. It's you can take the same exact pedal and just double up everything quantity wise, and it's just going to be cheaper because that's how manufacturing works.
Yeah, but I think what I do like about some of these brands, and I was talking to Reese from Bigfoot Engineering today, because he was saying, I've got some new stuff that I'm working on, and he just builds everything by hand, one by one, just fulfilling orders, and every week more orders are coming in. He's trying to build more, and I just think about him just sitting at home with his soldering iron, all these circuit boards, doing it by himself, and there isn't that many people doing that either. And you kind of think, well, there is definitely some justification in some of these prices.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't know what the scene's like over there, but over here, that's very normal. There's lots. Most of the companies guys that I talk to are 1 or 2 man operations.
Yeah,
just soldering away, and
I think I do think that's amazing. Really, I just think the sheer dedication. I think anything going, right, I'm going to be a musician and I want to play guitar and I'm going to play in bands and I'm going to make my living from that. I think doing pedals, anything like that, the same thing. It's just that sheer dedication. It's when you're a new company, I've just got to do it and I've got to believe in it. And I think that's I honestly, I always think that's totally amazing. And I think NAMM was a great thing for that, for me, meeting all these people and being wow, you guys are really going for it. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you the guys that I took you around to mostly, we went over to the Fuzzrocious booth, for instance. That's the company right there.
Yeah.
The whole company was on the floor. That's Ryan and Shannon. With the exception of sometimes they have some of their kids paint their pedals.
I mean, that's because I don't know how long they've been a company now, but I do remember mentioning them on the podcast. Yeah, quite some time ago. About I'd seen the pedal painted by the kids, and I'd seen it was an option on the website, and I was just that's just amazing. Yeah, it's just those little touches. I think you can only do if you're a smaller builder, because I think when you get to I don't think Digitech, for example, are ever going to go, we're going to do a whammy pedal, but it's going to be this crazy graphic, because it'd probably just be too expensive to try and print that many whammies on a crazy graphic or get people to paint them by hand. Whereas if you're making much smaller numbers, you can do more limited things like that. just because you don't have to fork out a ridiculous cost to try and make something work.
Right, we talk about the actual units being cheaper in quantity, but the actual cash outlay is another story altogether. I've talked to people that said, if I don't move 1,000 units instantly, I lose money. Yeah. And it's like, that's boggling to think about too. Like you must move at least 1,000 units or you lose money. You don't even break even, you lose money. That's just, that's crazy to think about.
Yeah. But I've seen a couple of things recently, like Instagram videos inside the JHS sort of like workshop and the Earthquaker one, and it's basically like just a mini factory, isn't it? There's like 20 people like wiring circuit boards. But I've seen recently that Earthquaker on a couple of pedals have hit like 12,000 models. If that like serial number 12,000 of a particular pedal, I'm like, those guys haven't been around for that long to like hit that many. It's just like a total achievement. You think 12,000 individual units out there being used by different people. It's amazing.
Yeah, and you're right. They haven't. I mean, they've been around a while, but not like Boss.
Yeah.
Like they've been around. I don't actually know exactly when Earthquake started, but 10 years plus. I'm guessing. Yeah. But still, that's just it is crazy to think about.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is for me, the significant. Well, I say the significance. I mean, the thing that never really struck me until recently was that I remember there was a website when I first started playing guitar called Guitar Geek, which I think still exists, but I think it got bought out by another company. And they were the guys that started doing the kind of like cartoon guitar rigs.
Okay.
Do you remember those? They had like a cartoon image of like the guitarist, and then they had like all their rig done in like a particular style. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And that all kind of spawned from that sort of forum, which I think was one of the main ones at the time. And Brian Wampler was doing indie guitarist at that point, and it was just him, and he was just on this forum, and he was selling that book on like how to build effects pedals and selling his kits. And obviously, I didn't realize until a couple of years ago that Wampler was then indie guitarist, and that was like way back in the day. And you think how long people have to kind of go to get that recognition. Because I know some people have got like those really early like indie guitarist effects pedals, which are like the super early versions of the pedals that he makes now.
Yeah, a lot of it's funny you brought him up. I mean, I don't know if you know, but I do Chasing Tone with Brian like almost every week. So I talk to Brian a lot, and so it is interesting to hear his story, because he was at one point, like you said, he was on that forum with the book and everything. He had to basically make a decision: do I want to do DIY stuff and continue helping this DIY community, or do I want to do my own line? And he just kind of flipped a coin and went, well, I guess I'm going to do my own line. We'll see how this goes. So it's apparently worked out pretty good.
Yeah, I'd say that he's probably done all right so far. So far,
so good.
I really liked the video he put up recently, which was him like going through his like prototype cupboard, and it was all the stuff that he sort of like made before, and I was like, that is awesome to kind of see like all that stuff, from way back, and how far things have come as well. That's just like that's so cool. And
he has a ton of them too, like. So many prototypes. It's almost funny.
Yeah, because I suppose that's the side of that's the gear that we don't ever see. Is like it's not like someone made a circuit board and went, "Oh, that's good enough." These things come out of like time and revision and practice and research and development and constantly changing. Because I don't think, like a guitar sound, nothing's ever set. Your tastes change, your ears change, and the gear that's available, the capacitors, the resistors, all of that change over time, and it allows you to tweak circuits and change things, generally for the better.
Well, and sometimes that can cause things to be completely discontinued. Like, I was talking with a guy here in Portland, Jack DeVille. He does the Mr. Black pedals.
Okay.
I was asking him because I have an original. Back in the day when he first started, he was doing it under his own name, which was Jack DeVille Electronics. And I recently picked up an original Dark Echo that he made way back in the day. And it was years and years before he came out with the Dark Echo under the Mr. Black line. And I asked him, like, why was that? And he said, well, there was this one particular part that was very crucial to the sound of the pedal that was discontinued. And he just couldn't get them anymore. And they didn't make them. And so he had to spend all this time with different parts and different circuits to get a pedal that sounds the same with the parts that he had available. So that kind of wrench can get thrown in the gears too. Like suddenly you can't get that transistor anymore.
Because they're based. Are they based in Portland? They're near you, right?
Yeah,
Mr. Black. Yeah. Because they do one of my favourite reverb pedals, which is the Deluxe Plus. That's the reverb and trem.
Yes, I love that thing. It's underrated in my book. Love that pedal.
Because to me, it was always between that and the Strymon Flint. But I've just seen that they do the Deluxe Plus, which has got the separate foot switch for the reverb and the trem, which I didn't realise they did. And I was like, that's a total game changer.
They just came out with that just last week. Like just barely came out with that, yeah.
Because I think that was always the thing for most people. They wanted the two separate foot switches. So I think I'm glad I've seen that on there because that is awesome. That's probably one of my favourite pedals in terms of like a great reverb sound that isn't Strymon, because it's always difficult to when someone goes, "Oh, what's the best reverb and trem sound?" I'm always like, try not to say the obvious one to go for. It's like, got to try and throw some other ones in there, especially on the podcast. You know, we don't want to sound like a broken record. You don't want to constantly like, you know, everyone has their go-to products, but you've always got to be looking out for like what's new, what's coming out, and I think that's where things like Effects Database are quite good because you can just pick up some random brands that you've probably never heard of, but they've been making pedals for a while, and you can definitely find some great hidden gems in there.
Totally.
Yeah, there's just so much. There's so much stuff now. It's almost impossible to just try it all.
There's always something new. It's every day. There's something new from somebody. And I'm in a really, weirdly fortunate position where I'm at least in the US, I'm talking to so many of these people like every day. And it's like I'm hearing about things that are coming or things they're working on, and I'm such a nerd. I get super excited, and I'm like, oh, I can't say anything. I can't say anything to anybody. Oh, I have to keep. It's this weirdly.
That's the other terrible side of my full-time job.
That's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say you have that with one company in particular. I don't think we've quite touched on the fact that we met at NAMM because you work for Boss.
Yeah. So I suppose a little bit of the backstory for me, like the store that was in my hometown when I was a kid was a place called the Guitar Store, and it was at a time when the internet didn't really exist as a place. It wasn't an e-commerce platform that you could buy stuff on, basically. And Guitar Magazine still advertised guitar shops. A guitar shop would just list all their stock in there, and they were one of the biggest guitar shops in the country at the time. It was in a 14th century coach house outside a park. So this building was like 500-600 years old.
Whoa!
And it was over like
so cool.
3 or 4 floors. It had a basement where they had all the amps in. Really nice guy who used to run it. I used to go in there every week. And he used to let me buy stuff for like £10 a week. So I'd be like, I want this new pedal. And he'd be like, cool, just pay me weekly for the next, couple months or whatever. And that's where I found the Boss book, which is one of the only pedal companies that have actually made a book that had all their pedals in with sound examples and kind of gave you a little bit of history on everything. And ever since that point, I was just like, I love Boss pedals. I love the way they look. I love the way they sound, the history of it. I thought, because they were so much more interactive with that book than any other company out there. And as we said, there wasn't that much for sale. So I'd always been a massive fan. And when I started working at Guitar Amp and Keyboard Center, we did something called the Roland Planet, which was where Roland basically employed someone to come and work in your store to sell Roland products. And the first guy that we had ended up working for Roland, and we stayed friends. And through him, I met my now current boss. And 7 months ago, he was like, I need someone. He basically put up a job application. I was like, I have to go and do that job. I have to go and work for Boss because I know that's what I've always wanted to do. It's the company that I've always like totally believed in. And I went for the interview, and he was just like, when can you start, basically? So yeah, now I work for Roland Europe Group, which is the European control center, I suppose is one way to put it, for every single Roland outlet in Europe, Russia, and South Africa, specifically working for Boss. So there's me and one other guy, and we do a lot of the European-wide marketing, and a lot of marketing for Japan as well. So that's like a totally amazing side of what I do in my full-time job. At the moment, I'm working on like some videos for Japan. So we've like been tasked from Japan to do some videos. So it's actually like doing a proper film shoot and stuff, which is cool, and basically just spreading the word of Boss to all the lovely people all across Europe, which to me is fantastic because I generally do believe in those products. I think it'd be easy to work for any pedal company and be excited about what they're doing, but I don't think I think Boss is the only company I felt like completely passionate about since the first day I started playing guitar. So it's like a dream job, I suppose, in one way. Touch wood, it will like carry on for a little while. But yeah, that's the thing you're saying, like projects. I mean, there's always stuff happening, and it's just like a constant keep your mouth quiet, keep your mouth shut and don't talk about anything.
Right.
Which is always good fun. But I mean, just in terms of the stuff that we've got now, I just think with the technology and the history that Boss have got, I think there's so much cool stuff that we make now that's equally as good as anything else. But it's difficult. We've been around so long, and there's so many new companies coming out. It's difficult. I mean, SD1 is a great overdrive pedal, and we make so many of them. They're only £39. So people go, but there's another overdrive there that's £200. Your one must be terrible because it's only £39. And it's like, we've made that pedal for 30 years now.
Right.
I think we can probably bring the cost down a little bit. I think our longest standing pedal at the moment, I think, is the NS2 noise suppressor.
Really?
I think we've made the NS2 since 1987.
Wow. Like non-stop. No break in production.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
I think
I wasn't even alive.
I think the only change would have been that it went from the Japanese factory to the Taiwan factory.
Right.
That would have probably been the only change. But yeah, continuous production. I mean, Blues Drive has been a continuous production now for 25 years this year. Not many pedal companies have been around for like a fifth of that.
Well, that's the thing, is Boss is one of the original pedal companies, period. I mean, yeah, EHX back in the day, there's lots of there were several pedal companies, in the 60s and so on and so forth. But Boss started in, 77?
70.
Right?
Well, actually, the first Boss pedal was 76, but the compact pedal that obviously everyone knows now was 77. So it's the 40th anniversary of the Boss compact pedal this year. And I always, sometimes, especially on the Guitar Nerds podcast, because I mention it all the time, but I mean, with Boss, you kind of have to think, I'm just doing a bit of writing about the Boss history at the moment, and I was like, the world first that we've had, so we basically standardised 9-volt power, because there was no standard 9-volt power input at that point. Everything was 12 volts or like massive power transformers.
Well, think about what everybody refers to as the standard 9-volt power supply. They say it's the Boss power supply.
Yeah, so I mean, we've made it. I mean, it used to be ACA. It's been PSA for a long time, but ACA is like closer to 12 volts. But we standardised like normal barrel jacks power input. Everything like the battery compartment was specifically designed so that if the battery leaked, no battery acid would ever touch any of the components. Everything is like superior, I suppose, in a way, Japanese engineering. Like everything is thought, every possible situation is thought about that went into that design, and that compact design has basically been unchanged for 40 years. I mean,
and the fact that you could throw it off a building and it will probably still work.
There's a guy on YouTube at the moment called Simon the Magpie who's basically destroying Boss pedals, and they're still working, which I think is amazing. And it just goes to show how ridiculously tough they are. But what was the one that hit me? We were doing our for NAMM, we did a 40th anniversary video. So it's just kind of like this really nice, like reflective 3-minute video about all the kind of what we thought were the best products we've had in the last 40 years. And we had a TU2, and you kind of think, well, it's, it's TU2, it's a pedal tuner. But before the TU2, there was no pedal tuner. Pedal tuners didn't exist. And that was only 1998.
Wait, what?
Yeah,
the TU2's only been out since 98?
Yeah. The TU3, which is the modern one, is like 6 years old now, but the TU2, which was 98, was the first pedal tuner.
Whoa, that's so weird to think about. Like that, it's so ubiquitous. Like you have a tuner on your board. That's just what you do.
There's actually there's a really funny story, because I'm basically like putting together some Boss stories as part of their kind of 40th anniversary, and a really funny story with the tuner was that apparently they had the technology to do it for quite some time, but they honestly thought that no one would buy it.
Really?
They honestly thought that, because I've got a couple of friends who've been playing guitar since the 60s and 70s, and they used to just like, there'd be a keyboard player in the band, it's like everyone tunes to the keyboard player. Then the handheld tuners came out with the needle, and it's just like, well, you sit it on top of your amp or whatever, tune up, plug in, away you go. So when people had the pedal tuner, they'd be like, why would I want that? What? I've already got a tuner, why would I want one on the floor? So they honestly thought that it wouldn't necessarily be a great seller, and then obviously they released it, and so many people asked for it. After a while, they were just like, I can't believe we hadn't done this before, and that's what then spurred on people making pedal tuners.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I fought it for a while. I was like, Leon, with the Pelican Noiseworks, he was like, you got to get a tuner, and I'm like, but that's so boring. This is when I first started getting into pedals. I was like, that's so boring. I could get another fuzz for that same price. Why do I need like I'll just use my headstock tuner, like whatever. But then when I got one finally, I'm like, I can't believe I didn't just bite the bullet and do this sooner. This is so much easier.
Yeah.
Like so much better.
And that's the thing, and and there's still some people out there that are still using TU2s that have lasted all that time and still tune as good as the day they first came out of the box. And I just thought that was like, there was like a few moments like that when we were doing this video. It's just like, this is a weird piece of history. Like, we got sent a load of stuff from the Japanese factory. So in Japan, outside Hamamatsu, which is where the main Boss and Roland headquarters is, there's a research and development center, and they have the Roland Museum there, which pretty much has everything that Roland and Boss have ever made in one place, in this massive museum that overlooks this lake. And they sent us some pedals for this video shoot from the museum, including DD2. Now, DD2 was the first ever compact digital delay pedal. So the first ever small pedal that was a delay that was digital. Digital delays already existed in rack mount form, and analog delays existed in pedal form, but a digital delay pedal had never existed. And the only reason they did it was because the SDE 3000, which was the rack delay at the time, had the delay chip in, and they thought that chip might fit in a Boss compact size. And it actually, if you ever take the circuit board out, the chip fits almost exactly the width of the compact pedal. So if you get an old one from the Japanese factory, the delay chip is the exact same width as the actual delay pedal. And I was holding this DD2, which was a prototype, and I went, this is the first ever digital delay. I'm actually holding the first ever digital delay pedal in my hands.
That's
crazy. That was
crazy.
kind of a weird moment. I was just like, the amount of digital delay pedals that are out on the market now, you think it all has something to do with this.
Most of them, probably.
Compact. Yeah. And, there's obviously a lot of other companies that are putting a lot of great work into what makes pedals standard now, but Boss have always kind of like pushed technology and, kind of helped standardize a lot of things.
Yeah.
But
I want to take a couple steps back to ask you if you've ever heard this old legend, this old internet legend.
Okay.
That's been around. I remember reading it years ago on some forum in speaking about the DD2, which is because of what you just said. The chip is like so huge in there.
Yeah.
The legend goes, and that whoever was the boss at the time essentially locked his engineers in the room and said, "You're not coming out of here at all until you figure out how to make this pedal work." I don't know if you've ever heard that.
I have, and bizarrely enough, as part of my story, that is true.
It is true.
It is true. Yeah, basically, so Mr. Kakahashi, who was the guy that founded Roland, and he's got an absolutely incredible story. He actually wrote a book. I mean, just before I finish on the DD2, like he started Roland. He had like a really rare like blood disease, basically, when he was a kid, and he couldn't leave hospital for something like 3 or 4 years. He was in hospital for a seriously long amount of time. He never thought he would ever make it out. And there was basically a really rare treatment, like a new treatment, and it was between him and one other person who got the treatment. He got the treatment, ended up becoming well, and obviously went on to found Roland. He built his own TV in the 1950s and the 1960s. Whoa. He built his own TV, like valve TV. He had to buy the valves on the black market, and they were like 10,000 yen at the time. He had to borrow the money from his parents, and he built this TV. So he was just like a mega engineer, and he obviously helped invent MIDI, and MIDI was his gift to the musical world, because they invented the technology, and rather than keep it a Roland technology, they released it, I think, at NAMM, and said this technology is free for everyone to use. So he's like a legend in himself. He wrote an amazing book, and it's definitely worth a read. There's tons of great stories about him and about Roland. So yeah, that he basically, when he was the head of the company, they said, right, we want you to, make a compact digital delay pedal. And they took this chip, this DSP chip from the SD3000, which was the rack unit, and gave it to the engineers. And the engineers took all the young guys and basically said, right, you can't leave until you build this circuit into a compact. And
that's crazy.
I've actually met the engineer who worked on that pedal, and I went to Japan last year. He's built some of the best and most legendary Boss pedals, and he still works for Boss now. So that's the kind of like history they have even within their own company. This Masao-san, he's been there since like 79, I think. So he did like loads of the really early Boss pedals. And he's totally humble about it. To them, they're constantly moving technology forward. And, he said, I've made a lot of Boss pedals. And I was like, what's your favourite? And he named one that came out like a year ago.
Really?
Like, I love like the classic ones from the 80s. They're like, well, no. Because I was saying how much I loved, I thought how amazing the Spectrum was, the SP1. Because I was like, it's a one-band EQ. It's almost, by today's standards, terrible. But at the time, I was like, oh, that's incredible. I love the way you can just kind of get a fixed wah frequency and away you go. And he's like, yeah, but the technology's kind of old. We've got new stuff that's much better. So to them, it's always thinking forward. It's not like, oh, we made some great pedals then, we make some great pedals now. And yeah, the technology was great. They were like, no, the technology's old. We do something much better now.
See, that's an interesting thing because us, as you know, being a guitar player, we kind of romanticize the past and like, oh, this vintage this and vintage that, and we all do it.
Yeah.
But it seems like the guys, the Japanese guys over there, that doesn't, maybe it doesn't compute with them because they don't think that way. They're like, no, that's just old. Like,
Yeah.
It's kind of a bizarre thing to be heavily in the guitar market, which loves the past, but they kind of, not that they don't care, but it seems like it's not, it doesn't feel the same. Like
I think it's...
I picked up this old Silver Screw BF2 the other day, and I'm like, oh, this is so cool, you know. But I think they would probably go, well, it's just an old thing.
Yeah. I think, you know, they appreciate that the build and the time and, you know, the research and development that went into the product. But I think there's something about, like, I remember the first time I met Yoshi Kagami, who's the now current president of Boss, and he said, but Boss always look forward. They never look back. We don't want to reissue anything because that's not... It's almost like a Japanese thing. I don't think they ever want to kind of like go back on the technology. They're always trying to make things better, which is great because you know that that's a company that's constantly going to be looking for something new, and that's what they were doing with the DD2. Because actually, if you get a really old one or an old Japanese DD3 and you take out that circuit board, you can see. I think there's like, I can't remember the exact number. There's a ridiculous amount of components, and then on one side is that massive delay chip that fits the entire width of the compact.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
There's some crazy stories like that. I think with the old PS2, which was the delay and the pitch shifter, they used pretty much the same delay chip, but they wanted to put the pitch shifter in, and I think there was something like 219 components. And they could get every component on the board. They had to use 2 circuit boards, and they actually sandwiched together like Velcro. So all the components slot into the other side of other components. And there was one component. There's one component they couldn't fit, and it's a tiny like transistor. So if you ever take one apart, there's a tiny transistor that hangs off just by the legs on the side of one of the circuit boards because they could only join it on by the corner. So it's the only component that's not physically on the board. It's just like the depth of thought into some of these things is ridiculous. I actually took one apart to actually prove. I was like, "There's no way that's true," and I actually opened one up and was like, "That's true."
That's hilarious. I would love to see that. I mean, that's so amazing. Wow.
Yeah, and it's, you know, the modern digital technology now for all companies, Boss. You know, what Strymon are doing, even what companies like Two Notes are doing with like digital technology, Kemper. And that's all in the space of like the 15 years that I've been playing guitar. Obviously, Boss and the digital technology from before, but the last 15 years, how much guitar technology's improved. I just can't imagine where it will be in another 15 years. I think everyone will still want to plug a Les Paul into a Marshall, but there'll also be like some sort of mega Kemper that will just sound exactly like an amplifier that people are. But I think people, like I say, people are always going to probably want to plug a Les Paul into a Marshall.
It's true. I mean, who doesn't like that though? Plugging a Les Paul into a Marshall, it's a pretty awesome experience.
If you can turn it up, that is.
That's true. Yeah. Well, yeah. At bedroom volumes, it's not too. But I have a question. I don't know if you run into this over there or not, but like doing guitar shows and you know, displays and stuff. So I've noticed a thing that happens at some of the smaller guitar shows that I've been to. Usually I'm there with Leon or somebody or another builder in the pedal game because I love pedals, so I'm surrounded by pedal people.
Yeah.
And you get the in America, you get the old guy coming up who, or not that old, he's not like a 90-year-old man, but you get an older guy coming up, and he's like usually got like a flamed bowling shirt or something on, and he's like, what are these foot pedals? What do you need these for? Like they literally, like they've been playing guitar since the 70s, and they still don't know what a pedal does. Like it's kind of weird to me.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'm talking more from experience in store, but yeah, there's definitely that sort of divide. I think there's almost 3 tiers now because I think the real younger guys know loads about pedals and are kind of like using them to the extreme. And then you've kind of got like the kind of not middle age, but kind of slightly older players who kind of use some pedals, but only kind of use the ones that they want to use. And then, yeah, you definitely got the older guys who are like, I've never plugged a pedal in. I mean, I had a customer way back who was trying to plug a guitar pedal in from taking the output,
Right.
or going out from the input back into the output, and then plugging his guitar into the amp. I was like, there's no signal going through anything.
Right.
You know, and you think you kind of think to yourself, it must be obvious. You know, my dad's nearly 70, and obviously I've only just got him onto like an iPhone, and he's just like, I don't understand, because he's used to just not having a mobile phone. Right. So I think some people just don't understand how that kind of technology works, and I think we take for granted how you plug a guitar pedal in or how you'd use something like that, because we're so used to what we've seen in the last sort of 10, 15 years. But yeah, definitely you get those guys that have kind of never used them, never will, but they'll still get a great sound out of the amp they've got. But saying that, one of my best friends, he's been playing guitar since 1970, I suppose. Yeah, probably about 1970, and he's got 12 pedal boards, I think.
Nice.
He's got like awesome. A different pedal board for every situation. He's got a couple of hundred pedals. I mean, I've never seen someone with so many pedals. Just like, I'm sure I've got one of those knocking around in the pedal cupboard. And if he likes a pedal, like his favourite, I think for a long time was the Crowther Audio Hotcake.
Uh-huh.
I think last time I spoke to him, he's like, I'm pretty sure I've probably got about 10 or 11 of those now. Because if he likes something, he'll buy one to put on every pedal board. Because he's like, well, I want that sound on any gig that I need to go and do, any situation with any guitar. I want that pedal sound. So
that's interesting. I wonder how many guys like that there are. Because I have a lot myself, but once I have one of something, I don't necessarily want to get another one unless it's like a utility thing that I need for function.
I struggle. I must admit, I struggle to have more than one of the same thing.
I don't have a problem having more than one of the same style of effect, but I can't.
I can do that, but yeah. Like I couldn't have like. I mean, I love the Pelican Noiseworks Pelotor. I was playing it earlier, and I was like, because I was just having to look at it now. I was like, but I probably wouldn't ever have two, probably because I'd only ever really have one pedal board. If I had two pedal boards, I'd like, I'll probably maybe take another one but I've been down that road before, and it leads to you having like three pedal boards that basically all sound exactly the same. You're like, I'm not actually getting any benefit from this.
Right.
So I'd have multiple fuzz pedals, but having two of the same, I'd be like, I can't justify that. I need the money back.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I might have two of the I do have two Pelotars, but it's a pink and a silver, and they sound different. So I can justify it if it sounds different or looks different. But like having literally the same exact pedal, like some people do that. They'll buy the two, like you said, your buddy's got 11 hotcakes. Like that's like I could never do that. That doesn't make any sense to me. I'd rather have 11 individual other things, a hotcake
unless it's 11 metal zones, then
Well, of course, the legendary MT2.
Yeah,
I've got one that a guy modded into a fuzz that sounds so good.
Was that by? There's a guy in Australia doing that now, isn't there?
Yes, that's Mador Amps. Yes.
Yeah, I've seen some demo clips of his kind of mod of the Metal Zone, and I was like, oh, that looks really interesting. I might have to buy one of them.
It sounds fantastic. It really, really does. He did.
I don't know what he takes it away completely from a normal Metal Zone, right? And it does like everything from like overdrive to distortion to fuzz.
Yeah, I think he has a couple different mods that he does. The one I have is he calls it the Fuzz Zone, and so it's a fuzz. But what's nice is he still leaves that what is actually cool about the Metal Zone, which is that EQ section, still all works.
Well, because the funny thing about the Metal Zone, I think it was the first ever pedal to have dual concentric pots on it. So
really?
There's like double stacked pots, yeah. Obviously, dual concentric pots have been around for a while, so they're on Fender Jazz and things like that. But to have it on a pedal, I think it was one of the first pedals to have dual concentric pots, which we've now made the Metal Zone since 1991.
And it's one of your best sellers, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's constantly been in like the top 3 best-selling Boss products of all time.
That's insane.
Which is it was even in the back of the book. I think the back of the book was like Metal Zone, DS1, SD1. I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I always found it funny when I worked in a guitar store and I sold every day. I'd probably sell an American Standard Strat every day or every other day, and it's like, where are all these guitars going? Because UK is quite a small country.
Mm-hmm.
You could drive from Brighton, where I worked, to Scotland in 10 hours. And there's hundreds of guitar shops in between that are also selling American Standard Strats. It's like, where are all these guitars going? I read somewhere once, quite a while ago, that Fender Mexico makes something like 30,000 guitars a year. And I was like, where do 30,000 Mexican Standard Strats go? Where are they?
Yeah, that's a good point. I never really thought of it that way. Where are they?
Because the guitar market's definitely been growing the last 10 years. I think when I first started working, I used to work in a guitar store just on Saturdays when I was about 16, and at that point it had been at its lowest, and it was just then on the rise again, and it's kind of been nice to sort of ride the wave with it for the last 15 years and really see how far the guitar business has come, and stuff like podcasts, what we do, and YouTube has like been a massive boost.
That's interesting.
Industry.
It's interesting that you say that, because I talk to some people and they say no, it's shrinking, and I can't ever get a read on who's correct.
Yeah, well, I think there's always some areas that are probably like smaller than others, or that some areas might shrink. But I think electric guitars in general, although I remember reading on MI Pro, which is like a musician's like music industry, like professional magazine. It's online, and they have quite a few kind of interesting news stories. And I think 2 years ago, the biggest selling line of instruments worldwide was the SpongeBob ukulele.
Oh.
And that's the thing. I don't know, when you were at school, did you have to learn an instrument as a standard thing? Did you have to like play the piano or in music? Because in England we always had to learn to play the recorder, and that's now moved to playing the ukulele. So every kid under the age of 6 wants to play ukulele, and there's loads of YouTube stars that are playing ukulele, and like that area of instruments from like 20 to 80 pounds is just like skyrocketed faster than any other product in the kind of musical instrument world, which is just bizarre.
That is fascinating. Yeah, in America it just varies. It depends on your school district, whether you are forced to learn something or not. We had the option in elementary school. We could either do band or choir, and honestly, I was already taking piano lessons, but I was like, well, what instruments can I play in band? And they were like, here's your instruments, and I remember literally thinking, none of those are a guitar. I'm not interested. I'll go do choir. I was learning piano, but I wanted to learn guitar, and I was like, none of those are a guitar. No, I'll go do choir instead. I'm not going to go play the tuba.
I think that's just that shift. But it's difficult because unless you've actually got physical sales data, from across the industry, you're never probably going to get an exact like factual answer. But for me, I mean, YouTube I think has just been the biggest thing. It's been great to see kind of like a community kind of grow out of that, and how much that affects. Because before marketing, you look at old adverts and they were all printed in magazines because that's where you had to go. You couldn't go on the internet and go, I want a distortion pedal, because the internet didn't really exist, or if it did, it was in a really early form. People hadn't really understood how to advertise on there. But now that's what I spend my life doing, is like, how are other companies marketing their product? How are they doing it? Who are they doing it with? And, Instagram, as you know, we spoke about it at length at NAMM. Instagram has become like, they're companies that just live on that app, that sell pedals from that app. It's just like, who would have thought that like 5 years ago? You know, when we were still worrying about print adverts, now we're thinking, what are we going to put on Instagram? And how can we grow our Instagram following? You know, it's so bizarre, and it's just like I just find it really interesting. But I never really got into it when it first came out. But now I'm obsessed by it. Like, well, Instagram's just such a great place to just go, wow, that looks really cool, and then you can go and look up more about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's my obviously preferred platform. But you were talking about guitars and you talking about marketing, and so that's the other thing that I spend like all my time trying to analyze and figure out, because I try to work with all these small guys on that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, for whatever reason, from doing the podcast and from doing social media and stuff, I found out something I didn't know about myself was that I was pretty good at marketing stuff online, and B, that I enjoyed it. I didn't know either of those things about myself until I started trying to promote the podcast, which was kind of funny.
Yeah, I think that's since January, and obviously kind of got to know you and then a few other people. I'm like, you know, this is a great platform, and it's been really great to kind of like just get really stuck in with it and be like involved with it, and it's so much more powerful than I initially thought.
Yeah, well, we can talk more about that off the air.
Yeah.
We'll plug some more Instagram knowledge into the boss world.
Yeah, yeah. I'll just take some more photos, and but yeah, I think that's it. It's just so nice. It's been so nice recently with Guitar Nerds to just try a load of stuff that we wouldn't normally be able to get our hands on. There's so many great small companies out there that are willing to kind of send us something to kind of review. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's just nice to try stuff that you just can't find in a store at the moment, or trying stuff that almost before anyone else can, because I'm like, you know, it just gets me so much more excited. And before you had to go to a store and think, what's new, or what haven't I seen yet? But now it's just like people are sending all this stuff, and it's just like there's so much. I think Anderton's in the UK, who I used to work for, just hit. They now sell 10,000 different individual pedals, I think.
Wow, that is awesome.
Yeah, under the effects category.
Yeah, I know Anderton's carries a lot of my industry friends' stuff, so that's not too surprising.
Well, thankfully, they when I ran into my old boss Lee when we were at NAMM, and they were like, anything we should check downstairs, and I said, you should go and check Fuzz Roches, which they've now just started stocking. So
they have. Sweet.
I'm glad that they made them over, because I don't think there was anywhere else in the UK you could buy them. I don't know if Ryan had another dealer in the UK at that point. So I'm glad that sort of stuff's making its way to this side of the pond, because that's the difficult thing about the UK, is that we do get left out sometimes. Thankfully, I don't live in Australia, because that is actually the worst, I think, in terms of getting stuff. They really struggle.
It seems like that Australia has a super hunger for it. I've done some of these Tone Mob special pedals, and I'm surprised at how many I end up sending to Australia. Yeah. It's like, I'm like, wow, Australia's people need to pay attention to those poor guys down there. They're getting left out, like in a big way. But it's interesting. I don't know if you've probably noticed this, but when I listen to Guitar Nerds, it's so different than what the usual discussions that I'm having. Because I'm like talking to somebody either on Facebook or whatever about the, have you seen the new, have you seen the new Spaceman pedal, or have you seen the new, Mr. Black or something? And then you guys talk about more like, basically like bigger brands that I kind of forget about, like Boss and MXR, and it's like, not that those brands aren't doing really amazing stuff all the time. It's just I get so focused on, for some reason here in the U.S., at least with the really super gear nerd people, seem to get focused on the little guy and kind of forget that the big guys actually do rad things too. I don't know. I think, and that's always the struggle that I think a lot of people had with Boss. I've always been like a long-term fan, but because they're always there, you sort of forget about it. And I think if they disappeared, you'd suddenly really miss it. Oh,
You know,
very much. Yes.
you know, it's one of those things. Everyone's like, oh, why'd you go? You know, I put a post about the Epiphone Joe Bonamassa Firebird the other day, and everyone was like, oh, you know, why would you buy that when you could buy a Tokai? You know, it's just a Chinese guitar. And I was like, well, it's still a great guitar. And people are like, oh, I wouldn't ever buy an Epiphone. And I was like, but I guarantee if Epiphone didn't exist, you'd probably go, oh, there'd probably be a gap at some point. You'd be like, I really need to buy a guitar, and Epiphone would have been the one to fill that gap.
Right.
You know, and I think that's the thing. But you definitely. I mean, I'd love to kind of bring more of the smaller companies in. I think that's what we try and do, especially on like the Pedal of the Week videos we do, because it's easy to review some of the easier to get stuff.
Yeah.
But over here, there's not that many boutique builders, or not many that we've kind of managed to kind of find out in the wild yet. So getting stuff over from the States is great because it opens people's minds up. I think the difficult thing, I was talking to Scott from Stringjoy the other day because he sent me some strings, and I was like, the one thing that like totally sucks about living in the UK is just the cost it to get stuff here. You know, I bought the Feed Me pedal from Ryan Fuzzrocious, and it cost me like the equivalent of $45 just for customs to send it to me. So it was in the UK,
geez.
it was in the country, and they were like, yeah, it's going to cost you, I think the VAT was like £8, like $8. And then the rest was like a handling fee. So it's like, I've already paid for this and I'm paying for it again. So unfortunately, the UK, it's just difficult ordering that stuff. If you can't get it from a UK dealer, ordering it from the States can be like dangerously expensive.
Oh yeah. I mean, I even like what I have to charge to do international shipping on things. Sometimes I feel bad, and I eat some of it. I eat half the cost.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, well, you know, it's okay. Like that, I'm willing, you know, and I know other guys that do that. So for people who don't know, if you see international shipping and you're like, oh, why is that $15-$18? You know, that's crazy. You should know that it actually costs the manufacturer, the retailer, $30. You know, $30. So they're subsidizing it a little bit, but I look at it and I'm like, man, I know all this. So it's like this $200 item actually costs them close to $300.
Yeah,
it
is crazy, isn't it? And I think that's one of those you know, what we started about at the beginning of the podcast is just one of those things you just don't know all the costs, and you never will. People always go, oh, you know, always complaining. Someone's always complaining about price and something, and it's just like you don't know how much it costs to develop, how much it costs to manufacture, how much all the individual parts cost, how much it costs to ship to someone. And unless you've worked for a retailer, you don't know the margins that some of these retailers are actually working to as well. You know,
well, yeah. And then there's the whole, like, they want to have a little bit left over to keep the lights on and feed themselves, too.
Yeah, so, I think that's always the thing. People forget that it's a business. At the end of the day, this is all a business. This is all someone's lifestyle. And, you know, the one thing that got me recently, I suppose, was going back to the Wampler thing. Someone was like, has anyone got a copy of the Wampler Indie Guitarist pedal book that I can download? And someone was like, why don't you buy it?
Right.
It's, you know, that's that dude's lifestyle, and you're basically just making a copy of it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's part of his like living. That's how he makes money.
Yeah.
And it's like, so you can make pedals that you could potentially sell and make money off. It's almost a bit like, you know, help someone out. Do you know what I mean? Support someone's local business. And that's why, wherever possible, I always try and buy from the store. You know, because Google Shopping gets you, you know, it's easy to search something and go, I'm going to buy it from the cheapest place. But if I'm going to buy something that I know I've got to look around for, I'll try and buy it from the store. Mm-hmm. You know, if you walk into a store and the experience is good and the guys in there are good, why wouldn't you buy it from them? I think that's always the thing. I think I'll leave it. You know, I used to get that when I used to work in stores, and people would be like, yeah, you know, they try something for ages, and you give them a price, and go, yeah, I think I'll leave it. And you know, and I'd seen it because I could see orders coming through that, like, 5 hours later, they've just ordered it to their home address. And you're just like, why don't you just ask me if you wanted a deal, or why don't you just say, I want to buy it online, and we could have done something. But I suppose you can't. That's just the way that it's going, which is a shame, because I think people don't realise that if that keeps happening, stores will cease to exist eventually.
Well, and that's already happening. You know, like
Yeah.
at least over here. See, I'm a little bit spoiled because Portland happens to be a really good guitar market.
Yeah,
So we have a couple really good guitar stores, and they do well. But that's not the case in most other parts of the country. The guitar stores are closing because partially because of that, and just because of various reasons. But like I often forget that how yes, the retail shops around here are growing, but in other parts of the country they're totally dying. So it's a weird thing.
Yeah, Portland is definitely one of those places I want to come and visit. Quite a few people I follow on YouTube in part of like the gaming community as well, from like Portland or surrounding area, and there's loads of cool pedal builders, loads of guitar shops. It's like when I finally get out to America again, if we ever do a holiday, it's like I'm definitely going to make my way to Portland.
Well, we also have lots of good food and lots of good breweries, so you can look forward to that.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, craft beer. That's the next thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Separate podcast for that.
Yeah, okay. We'll start the craft beer podcast. That sounds good.
I've got a really good one just down the road from me, actually, that does loads of different craft beers. But when you talk to those guys, it's just like talking to us about guitar pedals. It's just like, I'm lost. I think that's the thing. When it's your passion, it's so easy to get completely carried away.
Oh, yeah. Totally. Well, man, we've been doing this for a little bit over that hour mark, and I feel like you and I could just keep going on basically any subject.
Well, let's see what the reaction to this is, and then let's just schedule it in for another week.
That works for me. I mean, we could make this a reoccurring theme. That's fine with me.
Yeah, it's been good, and I think it's nice to kind of always talk to people about guitars. It's not always the same group. I love Joe, Mark, and Jay, and we've been doing the podcast for 2 years, and we hope we do it for another 10. But it's always good to kind of talk to other people, and that was the great thing about NAMM, was just like meeting all these people on the other side of the pond that we can start talking to. Because
Absolutely,
the community in the UK is much smaller.
Yeah. Well, it's been really good talking to you. But before you go, I almost forgot. I was gonna just call it, but I didn't ask you the question that I have to ask you, which is what kind of pizza do you like?
Okay, because I don't know what like traditional American pizza is, but obviously Domino's was always like the main pizza when I was a student, and then you kind of move away from the deep pan, and there's so this is, I suppose, what I'll say is my favourite pizza is the pizza place that is literally just down the road from my house. So if anyone comes to London, it's called Adome Pizza. It's in Streatham Hill. SW2 is the postcode. They are an Italian family. I think they're 2 brothers, a sister, and they came over to the UK to start a pizzeria, and it's just like completely traditional Italian stone-baked pizza. It's absolutely incredible. And as long as it's got anchovies on it, I'm happy.
That sounds really delicious, and I should just make a side note that I've never had pizza with anchovies before, and I don't know why.
You should have anchovies. They're definitely an acquired taste. You just have to have them a few times, but once you're there, they're excellent.
I like fish, so I have a feeling I would like the anchovies. I recently had a clam pizza that was really good.
Yeah, I'm not into the shellfish. I'm gonna have to step away from that one.
A lot of people probably just like, we can't even talk to these guys. They're putting seafood on their pizza. We can't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm like that. If anyone puts ham and pineapple, don't put pineapple on a pizza. I'm not into it.
Yeah, no, please don't put pineapple on your pizza. Stop it.
Oh dear. Oh man, it's been awesome. Thanks very much for having me on.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. I just gotta get Joe, and then I'll have all of you guys on the show officially.
Yeah, you'll have a complete set.
I gotta collect all the guitars.
Yeah, exactly.
Right on.
Oh man, awesome.
All right, thanks.
Cool.
So,
thanks, dude.
Yep. So for Matt, this is Blake, and as always, folks, good luck and good tones. All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. It was a marvelous time, and you are marvelous for tuning in. I would like to ask you something real quick, though.
I just need a favor. It's not a big ask, but I do need some help. If you could head over to iTunes, and if you like the podcast, leave a review. That would be excellent. Haven't asked for that in a little while, and it always helps to get new listeners, new blood, new people to the show. And if you like it, please go there and leave a review. That would be fantastic. And other than that, enjoy. I'll talk to you next week.
One last thing before we totally sign off here, I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.